So how's it going, my comic chat army? We're here today with Christopher Michael, the creator of Crit, C.R.I.T. Right?
Yep.
It's do you say crit or do you spell it out?
I say crit because the whole
Okay.
entire acronym came from D&D terms crit. I just wanted to have an acronym that fit the word.
So how you doing today?
I cannot complain, man. Not at all. How about you?
Doing pretty good. So yeah, you just told us what did crit come from? What does it mean?
So originally in the first 5 issues or 6 issues, it means covert reconnaissance infiltration team, and then they completely rebrand themselves and they go rogue and they become constantly running into trouble. So the first like 5 issues, 6 issues of the book is they gain these powers, and their boss pretty much hires them as corporate security kind of thing. Um, he's bankrolling them, so during that time period, they take whatever he sends them on. That's where that corporate moniker kind of comes from because they're not very covert and they don't really do anything that's covert at all. They just break walls and cause chaos.
Mm.
And then eventually they decide that they want to do their own thing. And when they do that, so long, out of all this, my entire comic happens in a D&D game. Like it's I record all the sessions and then I storyboard based off the recordings. So everything that's said and done, they've done in game. And in the last book that I actually just released, during the game, there's an interview, and while they're talking, it's on the recording somewhere. I was, acting as an interviewer, and I asked them. I said, "So what does CRIT stand for?" And one of the guys just said, "Constantly running into trouble." And out of game, I was like, "That's not what it stands for." He's like, "Oh, what does it stand for?" And I told him, and he was like, "I always thought it stood for this. I had no clue." And then everyone was like, "No, no, no, we're running with it." So I was like, "Cool, we'll just rebrand you as constantly running into trouble, and we'll just keep the same acronym and move forward." But yeah, the whole book, like I said, it's just a D&D game that's taken form in a comic.
That's pretty cool. Like it's a very original idea. I haven't heard of that before at all.
I've heard that. Like I thought it was kind of common because you had like Critical Role and stuff like that, and I was like, "Oh, people must do this." And I talk to a lot of groups now, and they're like, "No, man, like we all say we want to do something like that, but nobody does it."
Yeah. So who do you record your session with?
I have an iPad. I put it next to the speaker on my computer. We play remotely, and I just record everything.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know. I thought D&D was old style board game you could play online.
It used to be. So when we first started, we would get together once a month at my house. We would play, in a big room, and I would just literally put my phone in the middle of the room and record the session. And because originally I didn't start recording because I wanted to make a comic book. I wanted to do recordings because we only got together once a month. And if I had to reference anything, at least I had a recording of it so I could go back and listen. And, then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, everything went online because we're all located, in different parts of North Carolina anyway. And after COVID was kind of, past the phase of not being able to talk or see each other, we some of us started doing more in person again. But honestly, when you're in your 30s and 40s and you have a family and other stuff, it's really convenient just to roll out of bed, turn the computer on, and then turn it off and go about your day. And so we just kept it remote. And now, like I said, I just throw the recording on. We have fun. We use a program called Foundry. So I build everything in Foundry, and it's like a virtual tabletop.
That's pretty cool. I've never played D&D, but I've always wanted to. I kind of flirted with the idea a little bit, but just haven't done it yet.
It's the, the reason we play Crit is because, well, now 15 years ago, we all lived in Boone, North Carolina, for various reasons, college, work, things like that. We all met through. I was a district manager for GameStop. That's how I met everyone that I play with. And I was at work one day, and they're like, "Oh man, you should play D&D." And I looked at them. I'm like, "Guys, I'm a nerd. I'm not that big of a nerd." And finally, they convinced me. Some of them worked at the AT&T store next to one of the stores I managed, and the other ones were my employees. So I went and I played, and we had a lot of fun. And then we just continued to play like every Sunday for about 2 years. And then we all kind of moved and did our own thing. And in 2018, I just called them all up after about 10 years and I was like, hey, we haven't played D&D in a long time as a group. I haven't seen half of you in about 10 years. Let's get back together and play. And we all got back together after 10 years of some of us not even talking. And it just felt like we had been best friends the entire time.
That's
And
awesome.
so we've been playing consistently now. We're going on almost 6 years of just once a month getting together, playing D&D, having fun. And so, the comic's great, the game's great, but it's really cool just to hang out with my friends and turn it into something.
So, did you take the code names from D&D and put it into the comics and the characters and everything?
Yes. So when I decided to go this route, D&D is traditional, like magic and warlocks and dragons and stuff like that. Well, we had always wanted to play a superhero version of it. We just couldn't figure it out. And I was playing Spider-Man on PS4, and that's how the whole thing came about. And I was like, wait a minute. The only thing that really is cool about this, everyone has the same Spider-Man, but everyone makes their Spider-Man different. Like with Spider-Man, the first one, you kind of had different branching trees and skills.
Yeah.
And I just thought about it in D&D terms, and I was like, really, I can just take the classes and they can kind of build their own people. And so I just started like stripping it down to the bare essentials in D&D. And then I took it one step further and I was like, we could put this in modern times easy, because if you really think about it, the only reason superheroes are super is because they're the only ones with those powers. So instead of being a magical world filled with beings, you have a few characters that have magical powers. Now all of a sudden they're superheroes. And so that's where I went with it. I said, all right, so what kind of characters do you want to be? And because we hadn't role played in a long time, I said, you are you in this world. Like, you are Terrell, you are Brad, you are all the same. You wake up tomorrow, you get a new job, and at this job, this happens. This accident happens, giving you powers. What kind of powers would you want? And one guy was like, well, I kind of want to be like a warlock, like spellcaster. Cool, we can build that. Another guy was like, I want to be Eddie Murphy if Eddie Murphy were All Might. Okay, we can do that. That is a barbarian and a monk put together. Cool. So I just asked them for all like what kind of character they wanted to be, and then I went to the book and I built it like their level progression off of that.
It's pretty cool. Um, so is the book a continuous book, or is it like each issue a one shot?
It's continuous, but you can pick up every book by itself. I'm a product of the 90s and I grew up loving 90s cartoons. Before we could just stream everything, most of those cartoons had to be contained. So if you picked it up at a random episode, you didn't feel lost. And so I've written all the books with at the very beginning of the book, gives you an update of where we're at in the story. So okay, this is kind of what's going on, and it introduces you to the characters on the first page. So no matter what issue you pick up, you're like, okay, cool. I know the gist of it. I know the characters, and we can go into it. And I always draw and write them to a point where if you just jumped in, you don't feel too lost.
Okay.
There's probably some pieces you're missing out on, but you're jumping in randomly in the middle of a story, so that's to be expected. But you can get through the story without feeling lost.
So even if no one has no D&D knowledge, they can pick this book up and be okay?
Oh yeah, the D&D jokes are like they're sprinkled here and there, only to get the people who know D&D enough to go, oh, I get it. Like they'll have that aha moment, but it doesn't take the reader out of anything. Like there's a line in issue 2 where Caliber does something really cool, and he just says, "And I didn't even roll initiative." And a D&D nerd will know, oh, I know what initiative is. Anybody else, it's just a line.
Okay. So do you kickstart each one of your books?
Yep. So I draw everything. I taught myself how to draw to do the comics. The comic was, like I said, the original idea was I was just going to draw it for my friends randomly, and it kind of took its own life. And then people wanted to read it, started doing Kickstarters, and now I have a colorist, so I got to pay him. So yeah, we kickstarted it, and I like to get really cool covers, which aren't cheap, and I like to print like aluminum stuff. I like all the cool things. We have on our Kickstarters. I've had energy drinks. The last one had our own energy drink. I've had a stuffed animal, which I actually just sold out of. I've had action figures and statues, all the posters, all that fun stuff.
Nice. When is your next Kickstarter?
March. I'm not going back to Kickstarter until I finish this book. because the last book I had so many hangups during the process that it put the book out like 5 months from my original ship date. And so I want all the artwork done before we go to Kickstarter,
Mm,
because I'll letter it in about 2 days, and then that way by the end of the Kickstarter we'll have the money to pay the printer.
yeah. Do you print local?
I use Aaron from Digital Print Universe. He's Pennsylvania, so
Okay.
relatively local to me.
All right. Um, what cons do you have planned next year?
I do Heroes Con every year with my buddy Dennis Valencia, and there's some local cons I want to do. Other than that, my priority is to really hit comic book stores and like Barnes and Noble and do more grassroots stuff, um, and really get the readers where they're at. What I've found at a lot of cons, people go for the big names, the voiceover people. They don't really go for comic books as much anymore that I've seen. And then you're always stuck in Artist Alley with 30 other people doing either fan arts of things or they have their own book, and you're kind of like you're making good connections with people, but you're not making good connections with the people who would want to read your book. And I would much rather have 50 readers than 50 backers that just back it and put it on a shelf. So I want to do some comic book convention things, like go to the stores and go to places where people read books and just get those books in their hands. And I want to do like I said, more grassroots, like in your face kind of stuff.
So can you go to Barnes and Noble and talk to a manager and get it that way, or do you have to go through like Simon and Schuster?
So with Barnes and Noble, if you are on their like publishing site, which we actually just finalized the paperwork now, we're going to be publishing books in Barnes and Noble. If you're a local person, you can contact the manager and set up because you're in their store. So
Sweet.
that's like my quarter one goal is to do. I have 2 Barnes and Noble near me, and I'm going to do an event at each one of those
That's pretty.
because
Yeah.
kids go there. They have the coffee shops, and every time I go into Barnes and Noble, there's people sitting in aisles reading books. You know, they'll do the manga, they'll do the trade paperbacks, and with Barnes and Noble, you're doing more trade paperback stuff. I have a trade paperback 200 pages, so I'm putting that book in there, and I'm just going to go and get my book in people's hands.
I think you're gonna tap an untapped market because everybody I've talked to so far want to get into comic shops, but I think you going straight to Barnes and Noble, I think I think that might be really good turnout for you.
Kind of what so I like to be the guy that stands back and goes, okay, everyone's going this way, right? And I used to work in distribution, so I talked to comic book stores all the time. I worked in game distribution,
Yeah.
and so I would talk to comic book stores all the time. And comic book stores are hard because if you take up one space on their shelf, you have to bring revenue, right?
Hmm.
And if you have one title every 6 months to a year, and this is what I got back from the stores. It's hard for them to do indie books, like true indie, and I'm not talking about Boom or Image. They're indie in name only. Okay, they pump out enough volume to take up a shelf. But someone like me or someone who's on Kickstarter just doing independent work, you're lucky if you have 2 books a year. And that was their complaint, was like, hey, if I have this shelf space and I get my readers invested in your one title, when are you coming out again? When can we tell our people that your stuff is coming out? Because they're a weekly, monthly, business.
Right.
But trade paperbacks, those people don't mind waiting a year. It's going to take them 3 to 6 months to to really read it, unless they're like my kid who reads through it in 5 minutes. But that they can kind of go back. I have a buddy of mine who I gave him a trade paperback, and he was like, my kids read it 3 times, because there's a lot of content there. And when I was like doing all my research with stores, we live in an era where Netflix, and these streaming channels have really changed how we absorb information. We want it all and we want it now. There are the collectors out there that like the floppies. Those still exist, and that's where my Kickstarter kind of goes into. I want my floppies on my Kickstarter so you can get one of the 4 covers, you can collect those, and then I want to go into Barnes and Noble with the trades and get the readers. So I had the collectors on the Kickstarter, which is what I'm gathering is there's a lot of collectors over here, and then go to Barnes and Noble for the readers.
I think that's an awesome plan. Yeah, my day job is working at a printer, and we do indie comics. And I was telling somebody that I was like, soon as indie comic creators go completely digital, we might be out of a job. You know?
There's more and more people that like digital, but for every one person that likes digital, there's 3 people that like physical. Because, and so I just actually just had a review done, and I had sent the reviewer a while back. I know him personally. I was like, "Hey, check out my book," and there's no issue between the two of us. He never read my book. I sent him a copy, and I'm shipping books out now, and I said, "Hey, like, what's your address? I'm gonna mail you a book." I mail him a book. Within a couple days of him receiving it, he reviews it. And he's like, I couldn't review the digital one. He said, because most of my reviews are done at work. He said, so when I'm in a break room and I'm scrolling my phone, people will interrupt me. But if I'm in my break room, I'm holding a comic book, no one bugs me because I'm doing something. This in your hand means you're scrolling, you're keeping your brain active in that time period, but people will interrupt you. And that goes for a lot of people. Then there's other people that are so tired of scrolling on their phone, they also don't want to read on their phone. And so they get that physical book and they're like, oh, So I think there's still a good market there. And kids like books. I have a 13-year-old, and I use her and her friends because she's like, I love my kid, but she's one of the nerdiest kids that I know. And that's great. I love it. I couldn't tell you how much I love the fact that my child is a huge nerd. She's into anime and manga. She draws all the time. She's just in that niche that I was at when I was her age, and so I pay attention to her and her friends, and they pick up books. Like every time this new book comes out in the area that she wants, we go on to Amazon, we order that book, and it's here in 2 days, and she has it. Because that's what she likes. She's like, it's in my list. As soon as a new one comes out, Amazon notifies me. I hit send. Cool. That's how you absorb your information. That's how you consume it. Then that's what we're going to do. And so I was like, well, Amazon's tough. The printing, I really do not like dealing with Amazon, but Barnes and Noble, they're right there, So we just found like an actual shop in our mall too that does manga, and they do trade paperbacks on comics. So that's another avenue I'm going to use. But these kids, I asked her, I said, would you go to Barnes and Noble and get a book? And she was like, yeah. And her friend was like, oh, I go to Barnes and Noble all the time. And these are 13-year-olds.
Yeah.
When did you get into reading comics? When you were a young kid, right? Same here. So that's where I want to go. It's cool to get the collectors that are in their 30s and 40s that'll spend the money. I want to get that reader that wants to spend $20 once, and then 6 months later, $20. But then they tell all their friends to go spend $20.
Mm-hmm.
I want those readers. I want in 20 years, I want some kid with figures like we have, like McFarlane. And they're sitting there with someone in their 30s and 40s going, oh yeah, I remember when when they had this little. That's what I want. Because that's cool to me.
So where can everybody find your books?
Right now, homebrewcomics.com. I've got everything on there. I just ran out of issue 0. I just shipped my last order, but I'll have a refill on that in about 2 weeks for my printer. I got to get a whole bunch of stuff over to him. But yeah, homebrewcomics.com. You can download issue 0 as a free digital copy. All my digitals are 99 cents. So if you want to check out the whole thing, you'll spend $6.
Nice. It's not bad. Is there anything you want to say before we go?
Updates. March, I'm going to be coming out with issue 7, which is called Robo Renaissance. I have a Youngblood tribute cover that actually was really cool. I shared it on Instagram, and then Rob Liefeld tweeted it out. Like him or hate him, at least he's out there sharing the stuff. So I think that's really cool. And other than that, just everybody have a safe, happy holiday. And then I want to hit it hard January 1. So I've got a lot of cool stuff in the pipeline. I'm working with 3 other publishers right now on some really cool things that I'm not allowed to talk about, but I will be hitting Barnes & Noble January 1. I do know that. We've finalized all the paperwork on it.
All right, sweet. Thank you for taking the time to come talk with me.
No, it was awesome talking to you. I think I've followed you on Facebook for so long. I'm like, man, I got to get on there and chat one day.
Yeah, right.
What? You mean you haven't subscribed to Comicchatauthority?
Oh, come on. Subscribe already. What are you waiting for? It's no big deal.
Like, man, don't forget to tell him to hit that like button.
Yeah, that too. Just subscribe.